Hello, welcome back. Another week. We're getting close to the end. 2 more weeks for this quarter. Then I will probably just start another quarter mid December. Well, probably a bit earlier. I think after the first week of December, a new quarter will begin. And I'm actually really excited. Right now we're negative 20%, which is obviously not good. Um, However, I did switch positions, so I am finally out of that long, and I have started a new short. That short was started on Tuesday, so I did what I was gonna say. Where if there was another negative 2% day for my position, I would close it and I would start a new position. So you can see here. Let me switch that. So we gained around 2% this week. Last week is around negative 10. So Nasdaq is on a greater. I mean, Nasdaq had more gains, but Nasdaq's been losing quite a bit more than SPY at the moment. Because it's more tech heavy. And we on Friday were actually around negative 17%. And to get to negative 25 to negative 17, the gain on I started my short on Tuesday. To start, I had to gain. I think my gain was up around 50% on that position. So in 3 days, I made around 50% on that. However, on Friday there was a pump up, so I decided to close it. Ended up being plus 16%, which is still pretty good. And then on Friday there was kind of like a pump, and then it kind of just died off, like in the middle of the day. It kind of just nothing really happened. And I did start a little long because I'm like, maybe we could end of year rally maybe could happen on Friday. But I was really willing. I was just doing it kind of just to see what would happen, and I closed it for neutral, so that trade ended 0%. And then later on during the day, just got me thinking like, what should I think forward? We have Nvidia earnings on Wednesday, and in the end I decided to reopen the short. So I reopened it and gained a little bit to the close. And yeah, I decided to reopen it, and from doing all that, I really only lost like a 3% gain in between doing all that, which is very little considering I minimized the upside risk, which could have happened. Right, you could have had a huge whole day rally, which happens, like a V shape, and we didn't really get a V shape. I mean, it was a good V shape, but I mean it didn't really surprise me. SPY ended zero basically. Everything ended zero. It was down like negative 1%, but in all that news, there was really nothing. I mean, I think Trump was lowering his tariffs, which I think came out. I don't know why it was bigger news because I only heard about that until the afternoon of this on Friday, and it's to make things more affordable. Which theoretically, what he was saying was that the tariffs are going to actually make food prices more affordable, which is contradictory. But now they're taking off the tariffs, and there's going to be a tariff decision on if it's all legal by the end of November, most likely. So that could be in this quarter. I mean, I'm going to have positions, obviously, but I'm not sure if it'll be. We don't know. Um, and so, yeah, here's the week. So Nasdaq did 2%. We did 2%. Nasdaq lost in negative 0.15. Overall, 42.4% of days outperformed, and Nasdaq's got 6.4%. So the question is really, can really Nasdaq lose or the SPY lose 6% in 2 weeks? That'd be before the end of the quarter, and I'd probably give that like a 20% chance of happening. Not that likely, but it could happen if we have bad Nvidia earnings. And what I mean bad, they're gonna be good, right? But if they start, decreasing their forecast, which for the past like 3, 4 earnings, I've kind of seen that. Nvidia got to like 210 or something, and at the moment it's really been just trading sideways. I mean, if you would have bought Nvidia since this quarter started, you'd be in between like negative and a little bit positive. So there's not been a huge gain on Nvidia if you haven't sold. I mean, if you sold at like 210, then yeah, but right now it's kind of in that 190 range. So it's kind of been trading sideways, and it's kind of just on the bigger AI market. From the Nasdaq and SPY, there really hasn't been anything going on. So if you just look at SPY, it looks pretty normal. Everything's going as usual. Um, so as you can see, 0.14, 14.4, and SPY is a little below 6%. So the Dow did hit all-time highs. It lost it though, but it did hit it. It's still the lowest performing index out of the 3.7. And here you have everything. So, when you see this, it's kind of like, I mean, here, let me go back up. So when you see this, It looks okay. Nothing's really crazy. Um, but then when you start looking at like AI names, for example, CoreWeave, Oracle, what else? Nebius. Well, there's been some assets. I mean, you obviously have, or Hims has lost a lot, which actually that's what made me getting a really good gain over here. I traded Hims, did good with it, but Hims has lost a lot. They're not really in the AI space. Um, Mostly tech has lost quite a bit. Quantum names for sure, but you really have all these high beta names which have been losing a lot. Which makes sense. I mean, you have an AI ecosystem that is circularly financed, which isn't the problem. I mean, all these companies are helping each other. The problem is this all comes down, when you ask the question, okay, how are they going to make this money? And it really comes down to, you have these companies buying GPUs from NVIDIA. So NVIDIA is kind of seen as a safe player. But if these companies in the end aren't able to repay because they're not making enough revenue, or yeah, they're not exactly, and their costs and their depreciation is too high, then it's kind of like, okay, well, you have an insane backlog of whatever billions, but in the end, how are you even going to be able to repay that? And that was the problem with, you have Oracle with their debt situation and all that. And really, overall, if you think about it, like, okay, AI is a huge productivity boost, but are you willing to pay 5, 10 times the current model pricings for your AI? I don't think most users will. That's kind of like in the dot com bubble where you had, insane. I mean, the earnings weren't good, right? I mean, you didn't really have good earnings, but they were just saying, you have a lot of interactions on our website. Look how many, eyeballs we can get. Look how many, look at the traffic. It's insane. If we were only able to profitable, if we were only able to profit, like, if you were only able to charge, for example, 1% of these people, we would make this much money. But in the end, no one really, no one, they wouldn't really want to charge. No one's wanting to pay. Like, would you be willing to pay 200 a month for your AI? Most likely not. Now you can obviously have cheaper models and all that, like GPT-4o. You can have these or Gemini, and which is like, yeah, you could do that, but you're still going to be losing a lot of money. OpenAI is 1.43 trillion in financing. Like, are you actually going to be? There's no way um, that they're going to even be able to be close to repaying that. And if their plan is to become cash flow positive by around 2030, which is what they're saying. So if that's what they're saying, realistically, we're probably looking at 2035 or later. Um, if that's going to take that long to happen, which is like 5 to 10 years, you don't even know what's going to happen in the next year. So imagine 5 to 10 years. Um, OpenAI could probably not even, like, it could be a pretty big fail. I mean, in 5 to 10 years, imagine how quick GPUs have been improving. So the GPUs of today are not going to be worth. They're going to depreciate a lot in 5 to 10 years. So it's kind of like it's a little. It's like a big, and everyone knows we're in a bubble, but it's kind of like a weird. We're in an indecisive point. So that's why I started a short on Tuesday, and that short really did really well. I mean, it was up 50% at some point on the pre-market, and I was sleeping, and then closed it for a good gain, and I reshorted, kind of just by that explanation. You have OpenAI even coming to the government for a bailout. That just looks pretty bad. They want to. Their CFO was saying how they wanted to, um, like, put like a low limit on like their financing deal. So they have like a, how would you call it, like a, so like they're in a way covered at some point. If like their financing doesn't work or whatever, that their losses aren't just an insane amount, that they're somewhat covered. And the government said, no, we're not doing that, which makes sense. Why would you want to cover a bunch of spending for AI models? And it all just seems kind of weird. One company that comes to mind that's doing it well is Palantir. You have Palantir over here um, implementing AI for companies to improve the productivity, which is basically the bull case for AI. The big payers are going to be, in universities or companies, the users for sure, but if they're not even, if they're charging $5, $15 and they're still burning insane amounts of money, imagine how much they're gonna have to charge the consumer for them to even be viable. And that's why they were saying we're gonna start bringing out $20,000 a month models. We're gonna start bringing out $2,000 a month models. And these were kind of directed towards companies and stuff. Um, it's like for 20,000 a month, like, that's basically at that point you can just pay someone, an expert. You can hire someone, but whatever. I mean, how many companies are willing to do that, and how many people do they, or how many models sold do they actually need to even be cash flow positive with their minimal amounts of revenue they're only making right now? I think what was like high 20 billion, and they're financing 1.43 trillion. So it's like, all right, like, that's basically more than 50 times. That's, yeah, more than 50 times. Um, so it just seems very optimistic, very fake. That's kind of what I was thinking on Tuesday. And there's going to be no rate, or it's a coin toss. There most likely will not be a rate cut in December. The odds were like 70-30 a couple weeks ago, and it's really just been declining. And right now it's a 50-50. No rate cut makes sense. Like, personally, economically, I wouldn't do a rate cut, but we still, it's in the air. We don't know. That's kind of been shaking the markets a little. And personally, I don't think we'll get a rate cut, but we'll have to see. And yeah, and then you have Nvidia earnings on Wednesday, so that's gonna be very big. So you can see the short that I started on Tuesday, and that was towards the end of the day. So the effects became on Wednesday, and that's why we have a big gain on Wednesday, big gain on Thursday. There was a big gain on Friday, but kind of went away. And so overall this week we still ended up positive 2%, so that's good. And here we have profitable trades 55. And the ratios for the mean gains and losses are actually the exact same from last week. SPY's losses did increase a little, so it's gone a bit worse just because of the red days that's been happening. And our ratios, the differences are the same from last week, but our standard deviation has gone quite a bit less, so that's good. It's less than 5x, so that's good. And the transactions have increased a little bit, kind of because I've been switching around. Day trade, there's actually one on Friday, and the beta has decreased by a lot. That's seen by the short position that I have. And I still have it, so I reopened it at the end on Friday. And yeah, that's kind of all the points I wanted to get through. So you have, and then CoreWeave, has fallen probably like more than 50% from its like 150. So the question is, is it going to continue happening, or is it just going to go back up and do a V shape? And most of the time it's been V-shaped recoveries, but I didn't really see that. It wasn't like the bulls were not that strong on Friday. It was pretty weak. Compared to the last Friday where we had the government shutdown, that thing we did a total V. Like, it was just completely, and it just lost it all. So, Bitcoin's doing really bad. I'm really excited, or not excited, but when I do the quarter review, you can see kind of all the trades that I was thinking in the past, and almost every single one of them, except the last trade I've held, worked out. Like, if I would have just held it, they would have worked out. The ones that I sold at a loss, or the ones that I've sold at a loss, they all would have worked out except one. So it's kind of like, it's like, in a way, if I did a lot of good trades, I just closed them too early. And, we still would have had a very good quarter if I would have, which I did. I closed my trade when we were on like 12%. I opened a short when I was around 12. I closed it at 0, and then I started another short, and that's kind of what led to the fall. But I mean, even after all, I closed them kind of, a lot of trades I closed too early. Google I closed early, CoreWeave I closed early. A lot of these trades I did close too early on my gains, but in the end I still got to around 12%. So I was pretty happy about that, and then kind of decreased quite a bit from now. But there's still a lot of money to be made, a lot of gains to be made, and kind of just have to be patient. So yeah, that's the video, a bit longer this time, but just explaining the situation. And I'm still ready to switch positions. So on Monday, if there's like a good green day, I probably would have covered and just held off. So yeah. So I hope we have another great week. Hopefully we're not in the 20s next week, hopefully. And we're back. And I think a good close for the quarter would be -10 would be pretty good. because it's very hard to recover from negative 23, I think we were. So it's very hard to do. If we were on negative 10, that'd be pretty successful. And then we'd have another quarter starting mid January to mid March. So that's a long quarter. Um, and yeah, so hope for another week. See you next week. And we'll only have one more week after that week. So the quarter ends the last Friday of November. And then I'll probably do a weekly video. And then I'll do the new quarter. So it's like a week buffer time. And then, yeah. All right. Thanks for watching and see you next week.